morning from Vietnam, everybody. My name is Joshua from Vietnam. I am here alone today to talk to you about a whole lot of things. So go ahead and fill your cup with whatever bitter brew you're drinking this morning, and let's jump right into it. I'm alone again for the second time. Sash was not able to join me. I'm not totally clear on the reasons why. I really enjoy having him on here as well for a couple of reasons. One, preparation is a lot less work when I don't need to speak continuously for an hour long. And conversation naturally can develop. And two, Sash and I disagree on a lot of different things. He thinks I'm a pretty crazy conspiracy theorist sometimes. So it's really good to have that balance in perspective. I'm not sure if I was talking over him too much and he's just a little discontent, or if he thought he was going to be YouTube famous in just a couple days. But hopefully we'll be able to talk this week, and next week I'll have him back with me. But if not, I guess I will begin to look for another co-host. I really want to be in radio. I'm not entirely sure what kind of legs this podcast will ever get. Maybe I need to do one a little bit more specific, but it is interesting to me to be talking, to be spreading my ideas, my thoughts, and things that I've been reading with anyone and everyone willing to listen. So I would like to keep going, even if it's just me, but as I mentioned before, it's a lot less stress if I have a co-host. So I'll be looking to fill his shoes if he does not want to continue with me. We've got quite a bit that we're going to talk about today, and oh my goodness, I don't have my PC set up just right. So I am going to keep talking and try to get that rectified. The first thing that I want to mention is that today in the U.S., is now 7:42 in the morning on December the 14th. And the December 14th is a very special day to a lot of people online, because now football is ruined and baseball has always been boring and wrestling we know to be fake, but some people don't know politics to be fake just yet. So what's on everybody's mind, what people are talking about nonstop, is the political election. Is Donald Trump going to begin a coup d'etat with the military and take over, or rather remain unbesieged in the White House? Or will all the electors gathered together today in their respective states cast their votes and give 270 points to Joe Biden? These are the questions that we have, because December 14th is the day that the electors are required by law, not constitution, but by law, to cast their votes. Which leads us to a very, very interesting thing, right? Because here we are, I'm trying to get this, my screen fixed for you guys, but I haven't been able to just yet. Seem to be having some issues. I use a secondary laptop to control what I'm showing you guys, and I need to have that connected to a capture card on my main computer for streaming, and I just forgot to set that up before the stream began because, well, I guess because I'm a little bit off kilter. I've got no co-host. I'm flying solo, and I'm crashing into everything and everyone. So I'm trying to rectify this while talking. You know, if I want to be a radio host, I can't allow dead air no matter what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, we have life. So I am fixed. And now we should be able to jump right into PC main, and there we have it. So this is straight from congress.gov, as you can see. This is the full text of our Constitution, including amendments, and it's the 12th Amendment that specifies basically the parameters for the federal law that can determine the election. So what's going to happen today, literally today, is all these people are going to gather together in their own state. Each of these people are called electors. Every state will choose their own electors. They will prepare their ballot, send it out by certified U.S. mail as required by law. Got to keep the USPS relevant. That's right. All votes are mail-in ballots to the Congress for counting on January 6th. January 6th is the next date in our normal electoral process. And We see here the person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president if such number be a majority of the whole number of electors appointed. We know today we have 538 electors appointed totally federally. That includes all 50 states and Washington, D.C., but no, Puerto Rico, you don't get represented. Um, so you still need half. That's the race to 270, right? If you're under 270, even if you have more than the other guy, then you don't win. So if no person have such a majority from the persons having the highest numbers not exceeding 3 on the list of those voted for as president, the House of Representatives, shall choose immediately by ballot the president. Now, we mentioned before that the representatives each only get one state if this were to, one vote if this were to happen, right? That's the main thing that's important to focus on because it flips the majority from Democrat to GOP. So it will be Joe Biden. I don't know who the third would be, but I think technically counted, there's actually not a ballot like there are when the people vote. I believe each elector is required to submit a ballot for president and a ballot for vice president. So I would imagine there will only be 4 numbers cast, and it'll be Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, and Michael Pence. So these will all get sent in, and January 6th, Congress will count them. Now, I would like to refer to you to an excellent blog by a man named Vox Day. If you haven't heard of him, you're missing out. He does stream as well. He has a stream on YouTube called The Dark Stream, and he is one of the founders and runners of Unauthorized TV, unauthorized.tv, where you can find fantastic content from fantastic people like Owen Benjamin, who's I'm a bear and I'm a subscriber over there. So I want to read his latest blog post. Expect a surprise tomorrow. His is rather short and it refers us to a much longer post that I might read because I'm solo and really I need someone else's ideas to balance mine. And the truth is I'm just in full agreement with Vox Day about almost everything. So reading his blog isn't the most interesting. But don't be surprised, Vox writes, if the count of the state electors doesn't quite go how the media is telling everyone to expect. Alex McCrease explains the process is considerably messier and far more flexible than the vast majority of the people understand. So that's what I want to get into. He has this excerpt of her article, which we'll read here and then we'll skip when we go to her article. And he talks specifically, let me zoom in here to make it a little bit easier to read. In America, presidential electors get the votes counted even when they, and then we've got a funny little list here, didn't even send the certificate of the vote, as happened Georgia in 1800, represented territories that weren't even a state, Indiana in 1870 and Missouri in 1821, and Michigan in 1837. If the votes weren't certified as properly appointed by their state governor, well, Texas did that in 1873, and Massachusetts did it in 1873 as well. They didn't cast their votes on the prescribed day, such as Wisconsin in 1857. They didn't certify that they voted by ballot, as happened in Massachusetts also in 1873. The electors were literal officers of the federal government, as happened in Connecticut, New Hampshire, and North Carolina in 1837, were replacements for missing electors arbitrarily appointed by the remaining electors without even a majority vote, Texas also in 1873. So she writes, with the history of hijinks laid out, let's imagine a hypothetical. Imagine that Georgia's 16 Republican presidential electors decide to gather in Atlanta on December the 14th, today, to cast their vote for Trump. However, only half show up. The others backing out due to concerns of safety or refusal to act against the popular vote. The remaining 8 electors just pick 8 more trusty Trump Republicans to replace the missing electors, exactly what happened in Texas in 1873. That might take an extra day, so maybe they'll end up voting a day late, just like Wisconsin did in 1857. They don't have a certificate from their state governor, so they send their vote without it. just like what happened to Texas and Mississippi in 1873. And off it goes to the president of the Senate, Michael Pence. Let's assume this happens in other states too, such as that it's enough to change the outcome of the election if those votes are counted, or let's say they're rejected in states that Biden needs to secure the 270, and then we go back to the House of Representatives. It's very, very interesting. Now, because we have no football and we have no baseball and wrestling's fake, we have this temptation to get emotionally invested in this. And this is the part that really needs to be avoided from all sides, every side. Donald Trump is not working for you. He's not on your side. And these people online who worship this letter named Q, right? These people online who are consistently talking about how Trump fights for the people and is going to arrange a military coup d'etat, they're insane. Would you stand behind the anti-Trump, or excuse me, the anti, excuse me, I lost my train of thought. So would you stand behind Trump still if he used the military to go against Senate and House and stay president? I mean, that's what Caesar did, right? Like literally, we're entering direct violation of the spirit of the Constitution. You can argue with me on technicality saying, well, if the Constitution's already been violated, then we're at war. And if we're at war, the president's not allowed to deploy the military anywhere. This talk of a military coup d'etat is insane. That's not even how they get us. They're not going to literally round us up into these FEMA camps. They're going to make us walk to these camps out of our own volition. They're going to make every other idea and mentality seem so insane and difficult and impossible that you feel the only thing you can do is give over your individualism to them. They're not going to show up with guns and drag you away from your family. They're just going to give you Tinder so you run away from your family all by yourself. And it's the same way that they're going to be doing it over and over and over. And my friends, there is nothing new under the sun. So we're going to skip Alexander Marquise's whole article because Vox really captures the encompassing points of it. And instead, I want to take a look at another election because I like elections and they're interesting. Let's go back here to the 1824 United States presidential election. So in the 1824, which I don't even think was in the list by Alex and Vox. Let me double check there. No, it's not even included. So we're talking about weird-ass elections, and we don't even mention this one. So in this election, we had quite a few candidates. It's not like today where you only get two. So that's the congressional caucus, excuse me. Here are the presidential candidates. We've got Jackson, we've got Adams, we've got Crawford, we've got Henry Clay. All right? They all are getting these electoral votes. So Andrew Jackson gets 99, but there's 261 in the union at that time. So you need 131 to win. So even though Jackson was leading the Senate, like I just read you, the 12th Amendment isn't vague about this. We are not a democracy. May I remind you, we are a representative republic. So your vote doesn't matter. You don't even have the right to vote. States give you the right. I don't even like the word right. States allow you to vote by their own legislatures. You can argue that you have the right to vote for your state's legislatures, and I would need to look at your own state constitution to know that, because the federal constitution doesn't give this to you. So here it is. My boy Andrew Jackson wins it with 99 to 84. And the House is just like, nah, bro, we're going with Adams. And that's it. And John Quincy Adams became president, and that was the end of it. It's called a contingent election. This isn't the first time, the only time it's happened. Now, it hasn't happened in recent history. right? This isn't something that's totally new, and I don't really know if we've ever been this polarized. I know we talk about it. I know we talk about it a lot. But oh my goodness, could people ever be this this hateful over politics? Of course they could. People are easily to manipulate. They've given us TV to make us not even care, right? To create this idea of the proles from 1984. The people who aren't invested in the government aren't invested in the party, right? They even get a little bit extra freedoms because they're under the radar. I remember there's one scene where he's mentioning that he had to go into the proles area to secure pornography, right? They're saying that the party doesn't want the party members to do these things, but the pros, well, they're easier to handle if they have it. So give it to them. Give it to them. Don't be a pro. Stay awake, but don't be emotionally invested. Don't be a party member either. Donald Trump is not your party, and Joe Biden certainly is not your party. Let's talk about the lies of Richard Nixon. And I'm not talking about Watergate. I'm talking about the moon landings. It's why it irritates me so very much when Sash is just like, hey, what does it matter? Don't like it. Because whether or not we went to the moon is a framework for understanding the rest of the United States government. What is the CIA? It's got no constitutional backing, right? It's created by rules and ordainments by our legislatures who have been corrupt for how long? We see now the corruption's getting dropped left and right for the Democrats. So interesting. Now the news cycle is favoring the Republicans now that the election is over. All these CCP members, right? And then what is this list? I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but a list was released with like 1.5 million names of known CCP party members, and Mark Zuckerberg's wife is on it. I don't have the link for this one handy because it's not all that important. It's just it's ridiculous to believe that the first military superpower created post-dot-com era is going to have like, oh, here's our spy list, and this is our spreadsheet full of spies that accidentally got hacked. No. The Chinese have been planning a cyber warfare for so long that you're not going to one up them like that because they've already been doing it for you for 10 years before you even come online. So let's take a look at this now that we're on this. So this is just released December 13th, yesterday. I saw a couple people on Twitter misunderstanding this, thinking this is about the electrical storm that is supposedly happening right now. I've been told that the worst electrical storm since 1800s is happening right now, and some of my friends in North America are saying their compasses are messed up. Please check your compass and leave a comment in this comments section below, because my compasses are all reading fine here in Saigon, and I don't have a single issue of it. This, however, is about SolarWinds Orion, the company. This is an IT infrastructure company that my background's in IT, and I've been using them, oh my goodness, since I think I was 14 or 15 years old was probably the first time I ever used any of their management tools. I was using a TFTP server for them. But they also have NMS and EMS systems, which are element management systems or network management systems. And what they do is you deploy one big old server that connects to all the computers or all the devices of a certain type in your company, and it can make sure they stay updated. It can make sure that passwords are kept. You can watch if your employees are hitting time waster sites like Facebook and YouTube. They can make sure the security patches, like I said, updates. They can make sure that the firewalls are all like set to the company security profile standards. So normally, especially if you're in a Microsoft environment, you will create these security profiles, and then Microsoft Server has some limited ability if they're all forested perfectly in a domain. So if they're set up like to Microsoft's standpoint to reach out and manage them all itself. But then what happens when somebody brings in an Android? right? Or somebody's working on a Mac because your art department, your marketing department won't use computers, and then all of a sudden Microsoft starts to get weak, so you need these EMSs and these NMSs. And what about your switches and your routers and your basic network gear and your Wi-Fi routers and things like that? How are you going to make sure they stay up to date in their service patches? So SolarWinds creates things like that as well. They basically create a lot of different tools for network admins to be more useful and more effective in their field. And now the CISA, you can see this is coming from the Department of Homeland Security. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is a subset of the Department of Homeland Security. And they issued Emergency Directive 2101 last night, which is exactly what I'm talking about. This article is already edited today. I'm bringing you the freshest of the fresh news. That is my goal. That's why we're starting on Monday mornings every week, because I don't know. I'm figuring this radio stuff out. I'm kind of bummed out that I'm solo, but here I am talking to the void. So I'm going to go through and read this. Mitigate SolarWinds Orion code compromise. Now, nowhere in this emergency directive is a culprit named. It just says malicious actors. The federal agencies are now being required to completely stop using these because they can do that for federal agencies, but even civilian agencies are being told to uninstall everything by this company. They're saying nuke it. They're saying get over. The entire core of the company is compromised. Like I said, I've been using this company for 15 years. I was introduced to them using their management tools prior to college. How many other IT guys like myself have cut their teeth on them? And this is what they know. This is what they've been using for 10 plus years, right? Their entire job gets restarted. So my point about this is some civilians are going to ignore it. A lot of civilians are going to ignore it. And what they're saying here is that it is just full out barred. SolarWinds is 100% and completely compromised. Don't use them. Don't ever use them again. Don't wait for a patch. So this is pretty extreme. And it leaves us to something that nobody in our media is talking about right now, which is a very interesting thing. And that is how many CCP members are leading and running giant corporations and businesses in the United States IT. We saw this with Zoom. Zoom was pushed as the answer to COVID. And then no, it's controlled by a former military intelligence officer from the Chinese military. Right? So this is the strategy of the Chinese. They operate on thousands of years when everyone in the West is over there thinking about, what's going to be for the next 4 years? Who's going to be our president? Is it going to be Joe Biden or is it going to be Donald Trump? I'm so nervous. My guy's not going to get in. So here we are in real life. And I'm not going to say we're going up against an enemy or a foe because there is no war between China and America. There is a war between those who want to control you and those who they want to control. There's a class system that isn't visible to the eye in this world. And they're all in on it together. We know they're all in on it together because we know the Saturn V didn't make it to the moon. We're not insane. Well, we might be. But we do know that the Saturn V never went to the moon, and we know that the rest of the world watched that lie that we pulled over on our own people. And no one but a couple of drunk Australians in a bar went, hold the frickin' phone, man. What's wrong with you? Everyone knew that tinfoil didn't. It's not what even a spaceship looks like in Werner von Braun's own descriptions of what spaceships are going to look like. The guys who designed it even told you this isn't what they look like. And we still believe them all. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency tonight issued Emergency Directive 21-01 in response to a known compromise involving SolarWinds Orion products that are currently being exploited by malicious actors. The emergency directive calls on all federal civilian agencies to review their networks for indicators of compromise and disconnect or power down SolarWinds Orion products immediately, and the assumption is indefinitely. This is not wait for a hot fix. The compromise of SolarWinds Orion network management products possess unacceptable risks to the security of federal networks, said CISA Acting Director Brandon Wales. Tonight's directive is intended to mitigate potential compromise within the federal civilian networks, and we urge all of our partners in the public and private sector to assess their exposure to this compromise and to secure their networks against any exploitation. So why am I talking about this in combination? Well, only thing that's mentioned by the CISA is malicious actors. Everyone online is assuming CCP actors. Trump is not your friend. The United States government is not out for America first, and nobody in any position of power cares about you. You need to make your own living. You need to secure yourself. You cannot rely on these people, or you will be ruined. You'll be an anxious, depressed, crazy mess like all the Zoomers are in 2020. Why? Because we've been told our whole lives that the American government is working for you, and if you do things like some of your classmates go die for wars in the Middle East, then you will maintain your freedom and we'll take care of you. I told you guys in my very first podcast ever how Trump lost my vote. And here we are talking about the coastline paradox. And the reason why we're talking about the coastline paradox is because it's something that almost everyone has heard of before. So there is this paradox that land mass of a country cannot be accurately measured. And the more accurate you get to a certain extent, the less accurate you are. And this is for many reasons. One, it's because land is ever changing. It's because land varies so minutely. It's because it's totally natural and non-Euclidean. Now, I'm going to be talking later about Benoit Mandelbrot. You see that name right here on my screen. He is one of the founders of fractal geometry. We're going to be talking about what a fractal is for just a moment. And the easiest way to understand what a fractal is to understand this coastline paradox. So let's give it a read. The Wikipedia page has a fine example of how to explain it. So a coastline paradox is the counterintuitive observation that the coastline of a landmass does not have a well-defined length, right? Like you look at North Dakota and South Dakota and you see that line across there and you're like, obviously, you know how long that is. And parts of America, you're right, but now let's take coastlines as opposed to arbitrary lines that humans have drawn, like how big is Hawaii or how big is Florida with a coastline? Or how big is the United Kingdom? In this case, we're using the Great Britain. So when you decide how many sides you're going to use to measure your coastline, you then set, basically, you set your realms of error. So there are two things you can do. One, you can say, I'm going to use 1,000 sides, and I'm going to try to get as detailed as possible using these 1,000 sides. But more likely, you set the side length. So let's take a look here at their example that they're delivering us. So an example of the coastline paradox: if the coastline of Great Britain is measured of using units 100 kilometers on the left-hand side, it's or 62 miles long, then the length of the coastline is approximately 2,800 kilometers or 1,700 miles. But with 50 kilometers, you see the one on the right, the total length is approximately 3,400 kilometers. So it gets substantially longer just because these dip ins, and we're talking about the length, we're talking about the perimeter. We're not talking about the area. It's much easier to measure the area and much room for larger margin of error. But then right now we're talking about the difference between 100 kilometers and 50 kilometers. Now let's say we want to measure it down to the accuracy of a meter, and we're talking it's 500,000 kilometers long. And every sane person knows that, well, the coastline of Great Britain isn't 500,000 kilometers long. And if you walked it, you would know that it isn't 500,000 kilometers long. But if you measured it, with units of 1 meter, you would get something astronomically big, and the smaller increment you use, the bigger the coastline gets. And now I'm talking to you about this because this is something we can visualize in our head very easily just based on this picture. Now I want to talk about Mandelbrot and the Mandelbrot set. So the Mandelbrot set is a series of complex numbers. It's a set of complex numbers, and the function does not diverge when iterated from z equals 0. So it's infinitely repeatable. And if you use a graph essentially to reproduce this, the more accurate you get, you eventually hit a recursive property where everything just duplicates and duplicates and duplicates and duplicates and duplicates, and it's never ending. And obviously it makes something very, very pleasing to our eye. And the reason that is because this is what's called a fractal. And these are self-similar subsets. I was listening to Owen Benjamin describe fractals very well when he was talking about the difference in music, where the deviation of one frequency to another between two notes is really all that matters. And as long as that fractal pattern is the same, so that your incrementation of the number of hertz in your music is consistent, you can play it in any key and you can start anywhere on an octave and it will sound good as long as your deviation is consistent the same. And that's the truth, right? Like, he nailed it. He absolutely, he's got a great way of explaining complicated things simply. And so I want to go to this article on the from the University of Oregon, and it talks about how humans innately care about these fractal patterns that are found in nature. Like, think about a honeycomb. And that's an example of this shape that we see over and over and over in nature. It's something that's repeated on different scale over and over and over. We see it in molecular bonds. We see it in bees' nests. I'm drawing a blank of where else we see it, but you understand what I'm talking about. That shape is so consistent. So before their third birthday, children already have an adult-like preference for visual fractal patterns commonly seen in nature, reports University of Oregon researchers. That discovery emerged among children raised in a world of Euclidean geometry, such as in houses with rooms constructed with straight lines and a simple, non-repeating matter. Euclidean geometry is generally what we think of as being man-made, like think squares, think triangles, think cubes, think cylinders, think all these perfectly matched on either side. Like, we don't see many things in nature where everything is all sides represented exactly the same. We don't see equilateral triangles in nature. We do see things like hexagons, excuse me, it's 7. Hexagons very often repeated in nature. So unlike early humans who lived outside in the savannas, modern-day humans spend the majority of their early lives inside these man-made structures, and almost all houses are made with Euclidean geometry. If you look at this website that we're looking at, it's made with Euclidean geometry. I have these rectangles, and everything's on perfect straight lines, and everything's go down to what we think of as uniform. The only thing non-Euclidean would be they didn't space out their text so that every line is the same size. So since children are not heavily exposed to these natural low to moderate complexity fractal patterns, the preference must come from something earlier in development, or, as I'm suggesting here, perhaps are innate. The study, led by Robles, published online on November 25th in the Nature Journal of Humanities and Social Science Communication. In it, her team explored how individual differences in processing styles may account for trends in fractal fluency. Previous research suggests that such a preference is built by environmental and developmental factors across the lifespan. But this research throws something against that. So in this study, researchers exposed participants, 82 adults ages 18 to 33, 96 children ages 3 to 10, to images of fractal patterns and exact and statistical ranging in complexity on computer screens. exact fractals are highly ordered, such that the same basic pattern repeat exactly at every scale and may possess spatial symmetry, such as that seen in snowflakes. Ah, excellent. There's another example of perfect. I think even sand composition, glass also. Statistical fractals, in contrast, repeat in a similar but not exact fashion across the scale, much like the one we were just looking back by Mandelbrot. And do not possess spatial symmetry as seen in coastlines, clouds, mountains, rivers, and trees. Both forms appear in art across many cultures. There we go. They're even mentioning the fractal of the coastline that I'm talking about, which is a um, which is an exact fractal instead of a statistical fractal. I apologize. So, when viewing the patterns, Robles said subjects chose favorites between pairs of images that differed in complexity. When looking at exact fractal patterns, selections involve different pairs of snowflake like or tree branch like image. For the statistical fractals, selections involve choosing between pairs of cloud like images. Since people prefer a balance of simplicity and complexity, we were looking to confirm that people preferred low to moderate complexity in statistical repeating patterns, and that the presence of an order in exact repeating patterns allowed for a tolerance of and a preference for more complex patterns. Although there were differences in the preferences of adults and children, the overall trends were similar. Exact patterns were with greater complexity were more preferred, while preferences for statistical patterns peaked at low moderate complexity and then decreased with additional complexity. In subsequent steps, the UO team was able to rule out the possibility that age related perceptual strategies or biases may have driven the difference in preferences. That's my whole point. We understand we like these natural fractals that we see, which are the exact fractals, like a snowflake or like a tree, like a coastline. We understand already that we appreciate those and we like those. But what does this have to do with the tie into the election? Because there is something natural that should be leading you. And now I'm a Christian, I'm not a Hindu. I'm not talking about this eternal light that's good inside of you. No, when you want to be God like, look outside of you to find God. But let's start with just being man like. Let's not be the vaca that they want us to be. Vaca being Latin for cattle, right? Like they're trying to shift you in every possible way. Why does health food go up in price, but TVs and phones come down? Because these are the yokes that they're using to control you. Why is YouTube and Twitter and Facebook tightening their fist? I'm a nobody, right? I get 10 views. Nobody really cares about what I'm saying, so I'm free to spout all this. But you better believe if I was anyone of significant importance saying these same things, wake up. You're not led by the president. He is not your farmer. You are not cattle. You are a man. I encourage all of you, of course, to seek God and seek ye first the kingdom of God. But you need to not be, you need to be man first. You need to be man first. There's a difference. There's an innate difference inside of us. And they're trying to take that away every possible way they can. And we can't let them. I got one more thing I want to read through, and this emphasizes why I'm talking about what I'm talking about with the election and what exactly I'm going on. And this is a beautiful write-up about the Sri Lankan farming system by Wrath of None. I'm going to use the Thread Unreader app, though, to make it a little bit easier on the screen. If you're not familiar with that, you can just tweet at Thread Reader app and say unroll, and it will create a page of their thread. So let's go through here. A story of inappropriate technology. In the 1970s, it was decided to modernize the rice farmings of Sri Lanka, whose system that had not changed much for 3,000 years. The goal was to replace the water buffalo with the modern tractor. We're saving them. We're saving them. but the attempt had disastrous consequences. Buffaloes create wallows, which are these pools of muddy water, which they can't to control their body temperature. They're always filled with water, and these wallows create many ecoservices. So in the dry season, they're a place for the fish to run to, and they can migrate back into the rice paddies when the wet season comes again to fill the rice paddies with water. So I'd like to remind you that rice farmers fill their paddies with water not because rice needs to grow in standing water, but because it is such a harsh environment that very few other things can survive but the rice. So they're increasing their yield and their chance of success by reducing the chance of competition and raising the barrier of entry onto that ground. So in the dry season, most of their paddies are too expensive to keep filled, or in some places, this is Sri Lanka. Obviously, I have more experience with the Mekong Delta, which is always flowing, and rice farmers can pretty much year round keep their paddies full of rice here in Vietnam. But in some areas, it's a substantial deal. So in the dry season, these pits that the buffalo would dig would fill up and keep the fish populations alive. And when the rice paddies filled back up, the fish would then live in the rice paddies. The fish are not only valuable sources of proteins for the laborers, which are the landless laborers, and greatly help control the population of parasites like malaria, because these mosquitoes are obviously going to breed in this standing water if there's not life already in it. The vegetation around the wallows are breeding and hunting grounds for snakes and water monitors, which are lizards, and they prey on rats and that are going to eat the rice and the crabs that burrow into the sides of the rice paddies and then cause them to collapse and lose their integrity, leading to the collapse of the entire rice paddy system. Without the water buffalo wallows, villagers no longer had a place to soak the palm fronds they needed to thatch their roofs. So just the space weren't there. And in the dry season, when you were doing work on your house and doing the construction, you didn't have anywhere to soak the leaves because there just wasn't standing water. So they had to use clay roof tiles, which caused tons of deforestation because the trees were needed to fuel the kilns. With no pest control, since the birds were gone, no forest, the snakes and lizards and fish were gone because of the no wallows, malaria spread like wildfire. Even farms that used chemicals found that mosquitoes quickly became resistant no matter how much they upped their dosage every year. All over the world, when a system that had evolved for long periods of time is radically changed or altered, we find the same example of disaster and collapse. Here's Charlie Moran discussing the same subject in the book Strong Towers, which I'm not going to read because I've only got 8 minutes left. But the flip side on this inappropriate technology is the famous parable of Chesterton's fence. If you come across a gate in the field and see no reason why it should be there, do not remove it until you have figured out why it was put there in the first place. Maybe the most famous quote of his Chesterton fence from the long version from the book The Thing in 1929. The paradox rests on the most elementary common sense. The gate or fence did not grow there. It was set up by a somnambulist who built it in their sleep. It was not set up, by a somnambulist who built it in their sleep. It is highly improbable that it was put there by escaped lunatics who were for some reason loose on the street. Some person had some reason for thinking it would be a good thing for somebody. And until we know what that reason was, we really cannot judge whether the reason was reasonable. It is extremely probable that we have overlooked some whole aspects of the question if something set up by human beings like ourselves seems to be entirely meaningless and mysterious. There are reformers who get over this difficulty by assuming that all their fathers were fools. But if that be so, we can only say that folly appears to be hereditary disease. But the truth is that nobody has any business to destroy a social institution until he has really seen it as an historical institution. If he knows how it arose and what purposes it was supposed to serve, he may really be able to say that they were bad purposes, or that they have no longer sense, or that they have since become, bad purposes, or that they are purposes which are no longer served. But if he simply stares at the thing as a senseless monstrosity that has somehow sprung up in his path. It is he, and not the traditionalist, who is suffering from an illusion. We might even say that he is seeing things in a nightmare. The principle applies to 1,000 things, to trifles as well as true institutions, to convention as well as conviction. It was exactly the sort of person like Joan of Arc who didn't know why women wore skirts, who was most justified in not wearing one. It was exactly the sort. Millennia of hard-earned, handed-down tradition in agriculture and ecological knowledge is being lost year after year every time an old farmer dies without heirs. In many cases, we have passed the point of no return. We will have to argue in the dark. A variant, and even more obvious and darker than the original, on Chesterton's fence. Suppose that a great commotion arises in the street about something, let us say a lamp post, which many influential persons desire to pull down. A gray-clad monk, who is the spirit of the Middle Ages, is approached upon the matter and begins to say, in the manner of the schoolmen, "Let us first all consider, my brethren, the value of light, if light be in itself be good." At this point, he is somewhat excusably knocked down. All the peoples make a rush for the lamppost. The lamppost is down in 10 minutes, and they go about congratulating each other on their unmedieval practicality. But as things go on, they do not work out so easily. Some people have pulled the lamppost down because they wanted the electric light. Some people because they wanted old iron. Some people because they wanted darkness, because their deeds were evil. Some thought it not enough of a lamppost. Some too much. Some acted because they wanted to smash municipal machinery. Some because they wanted to smash something. And there is a war in the night, no man knowing whom he strikes. So gradually and inevitably, today, tomorrow, or the next day, there comes back the conviction that the monk was right after all, and that all depends on what is the philosophy of light. Only what we might have discussed under the gas lamp, we now must discuss in the dark. I think that one makes my point a little more obviously about how this is going. Are you ready to destroy the Electoral College? Are you going to be a willing participant? If the electors are supported legally by the states, there's nothing in the Constitution that says why they need to choose them. Remember. So if the states are so corrupt that they all want Joe Biden and Joe Biden walks in, how is that not what it was intended to be? So you're going to instead join with the people who just 4 years ago wanted to tear down the Electoral College. Why did they want to tear down the Electoral College? Well, because Hillary Clinton got the popular vote, right? Don't you remember? Don't you see how many states are weighing on this? And you want Donald Trump to do what? How does it get better for you? As long as you're invested in one of these politicians, it only gets worse for you. Look at the fractal patterns in nature. Look for your God. Look to make yourself a better man or woman, a better human every single day. This is insanity, friends. These people are not here to help us. The feudal system never left, and we're on their land. This is the enemy's territory. To my brothers and sisters in the Christian faith, you know that we are not of this world. This world is against you. And to those who don't believe in Christianity, then just take my word for it. The world is against you. Look at the evil. Look at the consistent generations of evil. There is generational evil, and there is evidence of it time and time again. There are families who are always in the right spot at the right time. Why is it that every single president of the United States, except for Martin Van Buren and maybe Donald Trump, are direct descendants of King John of England? Why are they all the same problems? Why are Barack Obama and George W. Bush second cousins? Do you not have these questions? Because you should. Why is it that when Tesla wrote about these ships that would take off with no electricity needed by us, but it would gather the energy out of the atmosphere, why was it Donald Trump's uncle at MIT who got all that access and closed rights to those writings? To memory hold what he wanted memory hold, to release what he wanted to release, and to give to the college what he wanted to give to the college. So the man was perfectly right about AC against all the conventional wisdom. He figured all this out. He promised you that 3, 6, and 9 were the secrets to the universe. But that's it. Everything that Trump needed to hide, everything that Uncle John Trump needed to hide was hidden. And you guys are over arguing about election between two 80-year-old men. It's insanity, my friends. I am at my time. I know I started late, but there's really no reason for me to go over. I've hit the most important things that I've wanted to hit today. Gold is still in a bit of a craze and a flat line. We're coming up on the season, the New Year season, the Lunar New Year season, and all of Asia will be buying gold as gifts. We will see consumer gold rise in prices over the next month. That date is February 12th, which the new year begins, and we will see that sustained gold price for at least a month if nothing else happens in the world. But I mean, we literally have conservatives cheering on Donald Trump to declare martial law, and I don't know, what are they, like, all the left was like, he's a fascist, and he's like, well, nah, but we'll make him one. None of these elite are out to serve you. That's the end of it. You know that. I know that. Look for a way to sustain, because war is coming, and you've got to make it through by yourself. With your community, build your family, invest in your friends, invest in your family, and conquer